Because when you are born, your brain is formed, your brain is physically formed as almost as much as it will be as when you're an adult. There are billions and billions and billions of neurons there. And what happens during the first 3 years of a child's life is that those neurons are connected. And so when a child is born, then they will have all of these neurons. And what happens over the first few years of their life is that the synapses in between them, the synapses basically are like branches. There's a branch that comes out from here, it's a little bit like that maybe. There's another branch that comes out from here, and they don't quite connect, but they interlink, and there's a sort of tiny little gap in between it. And that's what passes the electrical signals in between the neurons. And so those synapses get formed during the first few years of a child's life. And this is really important because actually it's only through encountering different experiences, it's only through being taught things, it's only through being shown things, it's only through copying and mirroring that they do during the first year, during the first 2 years of their life that this happens. During the second and third years of their life, these synapses are strengthened. There's a process called myelination, which is where actually these are getting thicker and getting more conductive to passing electrical currents. Now this is happening whilst you're going through, you're seeing the terrible twos, the tantrums, you're seeing the overwhelm, because what's happening is the brain's struggling to cope with this. It's trying to deal with all of the wiring, and there's all of this new stuff happening, there's all these new limits being imposed on me. And this is what happens when a child gets overwhelmed, when a child has a tantrum. What's happening is that actually their brain is getting so overloaded that it shuts down. We'll talk more about that in the second part of this learning. But it's really important that you understand that far more than in adult life, a baby has millions upon billions of neurons. And during those first few years, the synapses are connecting and connecting and connecting and connecting, just like roads in between villages. Just imagine that the brain's like lots of little villages, and we need to help a child to build the roads in between those villages. And the more that they use those roads, that then gets upgraded to a major road, gets upgraded to an autobahn, to a motorway, to a freeway. And so that's why they are so intelligent. That's why a child learns so much. You know, when a baby's born, they start to recognise faces really quickly. They start to recognise different voices really quickly. They start to recognise patterns of language really quickly. There's a huge difference in between a child who learns a second language or hears a second language, encounters a second language being spoken below the age of 1, compared to those that are only introduced to a second language after the age of 1, for example. All because of this process that's going on. And so that physical wiring that's happening is so important, because actually what happens is we then begin a slow decline into adulthood. Because those synapses, those neurons that are unused, start to be lost after the age of 3. We start to see them be lost. We start to see them reduce. It's not to say, and particularly during puberty, it's not to say that that can't be overcome, that actually some of those things can't be reconnected, can't be strengthened again. But it's really important that your job during those first few years of a child's life are so important to just strengthening those different connections between the neurons in the brain in order to promote their use throughout their later life. When a child goes through puberty, what happens there is, again, prior to puberty, what happens is, again, in the grey matter surrounding the outside of the brain, remember, this includes the prefrontal lobe. So this is where actually our personality, our judgment making skills are as well. Again, you get more neurons grow up ready to be connected up. And then, and this is where it causes all sorts of difficulties during teenage years, because the prefrontal lobes and the frontal lobes, their capacity is reduced. They are in effect almost shut down, whilst those neurons are now connected. And then over the next few years, during the latter part of adolescence, during the latter part of puberty, again they go through the same strengthening process to make them thicker. And this is why the teenagers' diet changes. You know, when they hit puberty, they seek lots of fatty foods and things like that, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to feed what is needed during that period for in terms of what's happening in their brain development. But at both times this happens during a child's life, so between the ages of 1 and 3 and during puberty, what you see is a child who's very stressed, a child who's not able to function, a child who gets overwhelmed very easily. Now I will talk about that in the second part of this video.